Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the special episode of the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am, of course, your host, Benjamin Dixon. Tonight, we'll be broadcasting some of the best moments of the Benjamin Dixon Show. And I guess maybe the best isn't the most accurate way to describe it, but really, they're moments that stood out to me as moments that are worth repeating because unfortunately, I was right about a lot of stuff that I wish I wasn't right about, particularly about Donald Trump, about the games that Hillary Clinton would be playing against Bernie Sanders, and not so much just Hillary Clinton, but the overall Democratic establishment and the use of identity politics against a progressive movement. We discussed that about a year and a half ago. So what I've done together tonight is we brought together some of those clips, and I want to play them for you, and I want to get your feedback because a lot of our listeners now were not here at that time. So take a listen in to the best of the Benjamin Dixon Show.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
we are now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
So one of the things I was able to point out early on was this unfortunate intersection that Donald Trump was able to exploit in the Republican Party. In this next clip, I really unpacked this. I really laid out the case for Donald Trump being unstoppable. I was hoping, a couple of times I was really hoping that someone would be able to beat him, but we really pointed it out because of what the Republican Party has been doing over the last 40 years, created the perfect storm that would lead to someone like Donald Trump. Take a listen to this
clip that I'll play for you. He's galvanizing the absolute worst in America in general, because it's not just, you don't find this level of bigotry only in Republican circles. You do find it in Democratic circles. However, it is prevalent in Republican circles, which is why Donald Trump is number one. Donald Trump is not number one because he has the establishment. Donald Trump is not number one because he has the evangelical base. Donald Trump is number one is because he's skimming from all of those groups and he has solidified the bigot base. Now, notwithstanding the fact that he's pulling out all of the crazies, all the racists, all the xenophobes, all the homophobes, all the very worst dredges of society, notwithstanding that fact, he's also doing something that this article in the New Yorker, and you'll see the description and the links that he pointed out. And you who are already here may need to refresh because that's the last thing I posted as the show was coming live. The article in the New Yorker is pointing out the fact that Donald Trump, because of the freedom of his money gives him, one, and because of his just natural bombastic attitude, Donald Trump is able to expose to America how imbecilic and childish and very simpleton our political process has been and our political candidates have been. Particularly in this season, Donald Trump has been able to expose the weakness of every single candidate, and not a single candidate has been able to stop him. Now, with that comes all of the baggage that is Donald Trump, the vulgarity, the racism, the misogyny, just glaring, all these negative facets. And so you have this person who is rather disgusting, drumming up a very disgusting base, number one contender in the Republican primaries, yet he is exposing all of the worst things about our political process. And for that, I think this entire summer of Trump going into the fall of Trump has been worthwhile, because we are getting a chance to see exactly who is beholden to who. And you have a candidate who has no problem calling out every single person that took money from him, every person that's taken money from the Koch brothers, every person who has been beholden because of that money, all of these people who are weak and spineless. The Jeb Bush has no backbone and no, just nothing there. The article really goes into the fact that Jeb's really sad campaign slogan is his name with the exclamation point. But when Donald Trump got done with them, it was a semicolon. So the articles are great read. You should read it, but I really want to dig into this concept that a person like Donald Trump is capable of actually being good for America, not in the Oval Office, but simply by running and exposing the very worst inside of the Republican Party in terms of the racist base, and then the very worst in the establishment party. And the other thing that he's exposing is that the Democratic Party is not really an outsider. The Democratic Party is the establishment. That's something that he's exposing to the benefit of America in general, because we like to think that Democrats are the populists. Democrats are the ones that are so in favor of the middle class, which, you know, in holistically they may be. But Donald Trump is exposing the fact that he is an outsider, and the Republican base has rallied behind an outsider, yet the polls are not demonstrating that of the Democratic progressive base. Let me separate that sentence, because that's two totally different groups. The polls are not demonstrating that the Democratic base is rallying behind an outsider. Instead, it is rallying behind one of the most establishment candidates that we have ever had, which is Hillary Clinton. So Donald Trump is exposing all of these things, and he's not intending to. It's like a person who makes something good happen, and their intention was not to do something good, right? Him being as imbecilic as he is accidentally exposing the fact that American politics is ridiculous. The machine is ridiculous. The amount of money that's involved, and the amount that each candidate has been purchased, and they're not able to speak exactly how they would want to speak freely. He's exposing that all of our candidates are essentially Manchurian candidates, because they have been programmed by the people they have to go to get support from. Now, all of that said, all of those things which are really good for the American democracy in general, you still have to look at the fact of who his number one supporters are. His number one supporters are the most xenophobic, racist, homophobic, ridiculous, asinine people that we have seen in public in a very long time. The only person who we see in public on a regular basis that represents Donald Trump's base is Ann Coulter. That's the type of person that Donald Trump invites and attracts to his campaign. And I just think that somewhere between the damage that he's doing by giving voice to all of these people who really need to be relegated to the dredges of our society, and between the good thing that he is doing by exposing how ridiculous our politicians are and how ridiculous our political process is, somewhere in between there, we're going to have to find a path that says we understand how ridiculous our politicians are, and we demand a better politician. But at the same time, we will not do it on the backs of these bigots, these homophobes, these xenophobes, these Islamophobes, and these racists that are making up the vast majority of Donald Trump's support base. So the question is, can we get something good out of this Donald Trump experience that he's taking all of America through, and leave the baggage, the negative baggage behind? Here's the problem with that. Donald Trump is doing good. Donald Trump is performing better than anyone imagined. And it doesn't look like he's going anywhere. And no matter how many people, yes, yesterday Scott Walker dropped out. He dropped out on the underneath the premise that he wanted to make room for another conservative alternative to Donald Trump. The problem is Scott Walker did not have any real supporters. He was at, like, after the CNN poll, the ORC poll yesterday, he was at less than 1%, which means no matter how much he feels he was sacrificing one for the team, he did not have enough supporters to help anyone. And I guarantee you're going to see this effect. The more people drop out in order to oppose Trump, the more the base is going to be rallied behind Trump, because the base absolutely loathes and hates the GOP establishment. So they will see this. They will see this, and they will think that, or they will be repulsed, because it is a move by the establishment to overthrow their candidate of choice. That will backfire ultimately. That's not going to play well with the base. So Scott Walker's biblical sacrifice, because yesterday in his press conference, he gave his, he wrapped everything in the Bible, right? That's what GOP politicians do. He wrapped everything in the Bible. And so his biblical sacrifice will be in vain because the people who support Trump do not want an establishment candidate. And that is the problem that the GOP has not come to terms with. They have not come to terms with the fact that they have created a base that hates the establishment and loves this type of vitriol that Donald Trump gives them on a regular basis.
So in this next clip, I deal with what is called, what I termed the augmented Southern strategy. And I think it perfectly encapsulates the use of identity politics to suppress progressivism and to suppress conversations about class. And I use the example of David Brock, who really unleashed the hounds of hell towards identity politics, or using identity politics against Bernie Sanders. So in this next clip, I unpack the augmented Southern strategy. And I want to get your feedback. What do you think? This is something I pointed out months ago, and now we see it coming to fruition. All right, so check out this clip and tell me what you think.
Which brings me to the conversation about the augmented Southern strategy. Because when we make everything, when we stop the conversation at race, we are completely incapable of having the conversation about the economic structure. And it goes both ways. White supremacy created racism so that poor white people would never pay attention to the reality that they were poor, not because of black people, but they were poor because of the manner in which we play capitalism, zero-sum game. But also this fear of anything and everybody being racist that has been fed to the black community from the Democratic Party, the Democratic establishment, Hillary Clinton et al., David Brock, and the rest of the Get Along gang, and even some very select black political elite who want to turn your attention and say Bernie Sanders is a racist. And so long as they can just convince you for a split second that Bernie Sanders is a racist, you miss the forest for the trees. And you stop and you never go and explore the conversation about the fundamental structure of our capitalistic system in America. You stop at race. And so white people, Republicans, are using the race card to get their voters to never have a conversation about economics. And then white people and black people on the Democratic, on left-leaning side will keep you from ever having a conversation about economics. What do they have in common? They have in common the joy and the satisfaction that they're doing okay in this current economic paradigm, and they don't have any vested interest in seeing it change. That, my friends, is the establishment. Whether it is Republican or whether it's Democratic, there is an establishment for which both parties benefit. But they know they can spook black people into thinking Bernie Sanders is a racist. And again, I could care less if it was Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. At this point, it could be Jill Stein. At this point, it could be, hell, I was going to say Krugman, but he's good in establishment now. It could be Robert Reich. Can it just be somebody who is bold enough to take on the office of the presidency and fight against those fundamental forces that is shaping the presidency to always serve neoliberal zero-sum capitalism and serve the military industrial complex? But David Brock takes Bernie Sanders' ad today and he does the augmented Southern strategy. And he says Bernie Sanders doesn't care. Apparently, black lives don't matter to Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders ran a demographically accurate ad in Iowa showing pretty much the percentage, the ratio of black to white to minorities in Iowa. But because we did not count and have enough black faces in this ad, that means Bernie Sanders is a racist and he doesn't like black people and he has a minority problem. And you know what? You've got some black people dumb enough to believe that. I would apologize for what I just said, but it's out there now. Who the hell cares? And you have some black people manipulative enough to play on that. And you have some black media voices who are manipulative enough to seize on that. And they run with it and they tweet and they write their think pieces. They write their thought pieces about the problems that Bernie Sanders has with minorities. When in reality, Bernie Sanders doesn't have a problem with minorities. Bernie Sanders has a problem with the Democratic establishment. But racism. And so now they have precluded any conversation on the issue of economic structure, which is the fundamental thing, keep the fundamental framework in which we exist, which determines whether or not black or white, if your butt could ever get out of poverty, or if your behind could ever get out of living paycheck to paycheck. But racism. And the same thing is true on the other side of the equation, right? The same thing is true on the Republican side of the equation. They can always distract their voters from ever paying attention to the fundamental structure, to the reality that the fundamental structure is the problem, because reverse racism, because black people are lazy, because black people want welfare and Hispanics wants your job. You know, they want that job that you want so desperately to pick tomatoes. When in actuality, companies have a vested interest in obtaining as much cheap, illegal immigrant labor as possible because they don't have any responsibility to pay them the minimum wage. And it all boils back down to capital versus labor. I'm not a far left socialist in the sense that I think capitalism has to be brought down. David Brock plays this augmented race card, the same augmented Southern strategy that Hillary Clinton played at the debates, where she tried to convince everybody that Bernie Sanders doesn't like or support your first black president, South Carolina. And because Bernie Sanders doesn't like and support your first black president, you should come run into my arms. Never mind the fact that my economic paradigm represents the status quo, which means what you got now is what you're going to get. You see how race is used on both sides of the equation to sustain the status quo? And the status quo is full exposure of labor to the economic forces of a globalized economy. I've got ideas, but that's not important. There's a lot of people out there with a lot of great ideas. The problem is, do we have someone who's willing to take those ideas and slowly but surely, we don't need a Bolshevik revolution. We don't need a proletariat violent revolution. We need fundamental change in the way we approach capitalism. I think Robert Reich's book, I haven't read it yet, but if the title gives any idea into the premise of the book, Saving Capitalism for Itself, from Itself, then I think he's got the idea. I'm not giving a plug. I don't get paid, don't even know him other than what I read. But the title itself is that you have to save it from itself. And so we've allowed racism. We've allowed racism on both sides right now to be, it's been happening in the Republican Party for at least 40, 50 years, right? Since 1950, 60 years, right? It's been happening a long time over there. But now the Democratic Party they're masters, the establishment, they are masters of spooking you from considering the one person who is having the conversation that needs to be had about the fundamental structure of our system. The reason you have to be in that top 4% of talent and opportunity and luck to get escape velocity out of poverty. But David Brock thinks that, Bernie Sanders don't think Black Lives Matter because he didn't have the right number of Black people in his ad. Augmented Southern strategy. We hear the dog whistles and you're just trying to pit Black people against a white man playing racism, playing the race card. Hillary Clinton, same thing. Bernie Sanders doesn't support President Obama. She won't say that in any other primary state. But when she got to South Carolina, because she knows she cannot afford to lose her stranglehold on the Black vote, she decides to play Bernie Sanders against President Obama. Augmented Southern strategy. And then the straight out Southern strategy from Republicans, all to keep us from talking about the economic status quo. I want to play this on my show from Hillary Clinton because of their augmented dog whistle, augmented Southern strategy. They have been malicious in this week. I mean, they have been vicious with trying to convince people that Bernie Sanders is a racist, when in actuality, the story is a little different. And let me see if I can get this to play from my Facebook channel. Bernie Sanders in the 90s.
I've got a problem with a president and a Congress which allows 5 million children to go hungry, 2 million people to sleep out on the streets, cities to become breeding grounds for drugs and violence. And they say, we're getting tough on crime. If you want to get tough on crime, let's deal with the causes of crime. Let's demand that every man, woman, and child in this country have a decent opportunity and a decent standard of living. Let's not keep putting poor people into jail and disproportionately punishing blacks.
Hillary Clinton in the 90s.
Not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel.
And so that you're not mistaken, she said heel, H-E-E-L, as if they were dogs. We had to make them heel before we can address their issues. All right, I wanted to play that.
Gangs of kids anymore.
Hush, Hillary, hush. I wanted to play that because this idea that somehow Bernie Sanders is a racist because he didn't put enough Black people in his commercial, as opposed to Hillary Clinton's rhetoric on super predators, which contributed to the war on crime and the war on drugs, which disproportionately affected minorities, especially poor minorities. Enough of that.
Okay, so this next clip is one of my favorites because I got a caller who called in and, came off as though he was reasonable at the beginning. But before the end of the call, he had devolved into shouting about some woman who was in front of him in the line using food stamps, and she was a Black woman, and how he wanted to just go up and slap her. And so, of course, I had to give him a classic Benjamin Dixon slap down. So check out this clip, one of my favorite moments from the past year.
You've tuned in to the Benjamin Dixon Show.
All right, caller, what's your name and what is your comment or question?
Yeah, hey, this is Eric from Houston. I found you on Twitter in the Hillary Clinton thread, and I love your energy.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, hey, look, I agree with you on corporate subsidies, taxpayer subsidies to corporations needs to be abolished. But you know what? I'm working poor. I work 6 days a week, make about $35,000 a year. And it's not the corporate CEOs that I resent. It's not the big corporations or the big businesses that I resent. I resent the welfare mom. I resent these people on EBT using EBT cards in the checkout line at the grocery stores.
Okay.
Here I am with my little cart, and I got to buy the generic bologna and cheap hot dogs and the macaroni and cheese every time when I go to the Kroger store. And the woman in front of me, and you're not going to like what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it anyway because I'm not politically correct. 9 out of 10 times, it's a minority. It's a Black woman or a Hispanic woman. The woman in front of me, she whips out a Lone Star card, and they gave it a nice name, Lone Star, so people will be fooled that it's not welfare, but it's welfare. And she's got steak and lobster in her carrito, in her cart, her shopping cart. And here I am with the cheap bologna. I'm working like 6 days a week. It's not the corporate CEO that's in the checkout line in front of me that's got the steak and lobster that's stealing from me through taxation, that's stealing my money that I work very hard for. It's not him that's that's taken from me. It's the welfare moms. It's the woman that pops out 5 different kids with 5 different men that doesn't have a husband in the household. That's the person I resent. Woman, go get a job. Stop stealing from me. That's what I want to say.
Okay. Appreciate your call. Hang on. I don't want you to go anywhere because I want to have a little dialogue with you about that, because you're exactly the type of person that I'm referring to, that you're angry. And I understand your anger. First of all, let me tell you why I identify with your anger, because I work 6 days a week, and at my hardest, I worked from 5 in the morning to midnight. Right now, I work from 5. Well, hell, I guess I still work from 5 in the morning. With exception of the show, right? I don't really call this work because I love doing it. But I still get up at 5 in the morning, and I still get off at midnight, right? So when I leave here, I go to work, so I understand exactly what you feel in terms of you work so hard and then you got to get a bologna sandwich just to make it to the next paycheck, right? So I'm with you on that sentiment. But do you realize that as a percentage of what you make, you are paying more out in tax subsidies to the wealthy than you would ever pay out to all of the social welfare people that you're upset with?
Okay, let me stop you right there. I don't view a tax break as a subsidy. I mean, this is where
straight. Well, even straight.
Like myself,
hang on a second.
Totally disagree with liberals.
Hang on, let me give you this.
A tax break.
Let me give you this. Not only a tax break, but also straight out subsidies. I don't want you to get confused and stuck up on the tax breaks. It's tax breaks as well as subsidies that are straight cash payments to these corporations. So go for it.
Well, I'm against that. I'm with you on that. If my tax dollars are going to corporations, I guess like the export, you're talking about the Export-Import Bank, where they fund overseas investments or big companies like Coca-Cola and stuff like that to promote their products overseas. Yes, I am absolutely with you on that. And if that's the case, if my money is going to fund that and it's a larger percentage, I am outraged just like you are about that.
So,
but you know what?
Okay, go ahead.
That's not what's in my face every day.
Right.
That's not what I see every day.
Right.
I see the woman at the Kroger store whipping out her Lodestar car, and I'm furious about it. I want to go up to her and slap her and say, "Woman, go get a job. Stop stealing my money."
Do you realize that most of those people do have jobs? They painted. Hang on, hold on. I gave you a chance to talk, and I want you to hear me. They have painted a picture in your mind successfully over the last 30 years to make you believe that everybody that's on welfare is jobless and lazy. Do you realize that there are plenty of jobs both at Walmart?
I think they are. See, that's a misconception.
That's a misconception.
People, they do not want to work. You know why?
Hang on. I'll let you talk. So now let me talk, and then I'll give it back to you. That's a misconception. Yes, there are people who do not have work, right? That do not work. And there's two things that I got to remind me to tell you about Owsley, Kentucky. But first of all, there are a amount of people who are not working, but there are far more people who are the working poor. You called yourself the working poor, but the working poor are people who are working 40 hours a week and cannot make enough money to buy food. And so what these corporations have done, and it is part of their policy, both places like Walmart and McDonald's, they would teach you how to go and get on welfare because your salary is not enough, even though you're working 40 hours a week. Now, that is not something I'm making up or pulling out of the air. We are subsidizing these corporations, not only with straight cash payments, not only with tax breaks, but we're subsidizing them by having to pay welfare and pay safety nets because they're not paying their people enough money. So now they've made you upset, and they painted this picture in your mind that everybody who's on welfare.
Why?
Hold on. You're on my show, so let me finish my thought, and I would be glad to let you finish. All right. Everybody, they have a picture in your mind that everyone on welfare is not working, but it is demonstrated that the working poor are on welfare. They are receiving SNAP benefits. They are receiving food stamps because the jobs that they have do not pay enough money for them to pay for all of their expenses of living as well as get food. Now go for it.
Okay. My point is, why is it that they're having kids with all different husbands and the man is not in the household? I mean, the man should be in the household working his butt off to pay for those kids. Instead, I'm paying for them. You're
paying for a fraction. Okay, I will chase that red herring a little bit, because that is a common not even a misunderstanding. That's a common bit of propaganda that they feed you on a regular basis. First of all, if I don't know if my producer is listening, I want you to pull up that stat for me of what we pay out based on welfare and subsidies to corporations, and send that to me so I can bring it up on the screen. But what you pay to these people is minuscule compared to what you're angry at them because you see them. You're angry at them because you've been told that's who you should be angry at. You're angry at them because you have been propagandized for years. But the truth of the matter is, that energy and that anger that you have, shouldn't that, and just answer me this, shouldn't that go to the people who are taking the lion's share of your taxes?
Okay, I will, but I want to ask you this question.
Wait, answer that. Answer that for me real quick, and I'll let you have the floor.
72% of black households do not have a man in the household paying for the kids. Is that statistic true or not?
That is statistically misleading.
Thank you.
Misleading. Hold on. We're chasing red herrings, so let's chase them. No. Do you know? Hang on, because you're doing what you're not going to do is just yell over me. All right? Are we going to have a conversation or not? Are we going to have a conversation or not? Are we going to have a conversation? You asked me a question. Can I answer it without you yelling over me?
Go ahead.
All right. 72% of people don't have of black children don't have fathers in the household, but that does not mean that 72% are not being taken care of by their father. It has been statistically demonstrated by the most recent research by the Census Bureau that black fathers are far more active and participatory in their children's lives. So now, even though they don't live with their parents, that does not mean that their parents are not taking care of them. That statistic that you gave just shows how many people don't live with their fathers, but that does not mean that they're not active. It has been demonstrated. You can pick up a book called All In by Josh Leves. It is demonstrated in chapter 8 that black fathers are outperforming white fathers, Hispanic fathers, and every other type of father in terms of being participatory in their children's lives and taking care of their children. Now, that's not something I don't pull stats out of my ass. That's documented. So go grab that book, chapter 8. Matter of fact, you can pull up the New York Times article by Charles Blow and find and read that data for yourself. So let's throw that out the window, because it doesn't mean just because they're not living with their family that they're not being taken care of by their dad. All right.
I couldn't disagree with you more.
But you can't.
We're on two different planets. If they're not in the household, it doesn't mean jack as far as I'm concerned. They need to be married in the household with the kids 24 hours a day.
Okay, so since we're throwing around stats, do you realize that 50% of Christians, 50% of all these conservative people are now divorced? They are not taking care of I could say the same thing, that just because they're not living with them, that they're not taking care of their family. That doesn't make it true. So there is a marriage problem, if you want to say that, in the United States, but that's not endemic to a particular group or demographic. That is America. That is America. Now, do you know this stat? Do you know this stat? Hang on, I got to give you this stat. Do you know that the largest county, the largest percentage of welfare recipients is in Owsley, Kentucky, which is 95% white and 99% Republican? Did you know that that they are the ones? If you want to be mad at somebody, why aren't you mad at Owsley, Kentucky, which is 95% white? But in your mind, you're thinking of that black person or that Hispanic person that you saw in front of you at Kroger, when in reality, all of your money is being sucked into this red state.
Okay, so a white person mimicking black culture is supposed to make it good?
Mimicking? So now you're saying I'm gonna laugh at that. You know why? You know why I'm gonna laugh at that?
To get blacks, get them off of the Republican Party to move them in the Democratic Party, and then decades later, white people start mimicking, seeing the blacks getting on welfare, not having to work, and you think that's good?
My friend, you are, I think you're right. I think we're operating at two totally different frequencies, because what I just gave you, I gave you a statistic based on the poverty level in Kentucky, that they are overwhelmingly voting with the Republican Party, and they are overwhelmingly so impoverished that they consume the greatest amount of your tax dollars with regard to the SNAP program. It's being absorbed into this one white county in the United States of America. And you decide to say that is them acting like they're black. You started this conversation like you were intelligent, but now I'm starting to question the validity of that premise that you started off with.
They're mimicking black culture.
How are they mimicking black culture by taking welfare? So welfare, are you not? Because now this is, hang on, hold on. You called the Benjamin Dixon Show. What you're not going to do is run off and spout lies and ridiculousness. You answer me the question and I'll let you have the last word. Are you saying that poverty and welfare is black culture and that is what Owsley, Kentucky is mimicking? And I'll be quiet. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I guess I can talk now. Look,
yeah, you have my permission. Go for it.
Who in the right mind, if they're working poor, go to the grocery store and sees black people and Hispanic people with these little cards, I don't know what it's called in Kentucky, and they get free food? Who in the right mind is going to say, why am I dumb? Why am I going to slobbing to work every day, 6 days a week? Why can't I just get one of these cards too and get my steak and lobster? It wasn't like that in the 1960s. Lyndon Johnson specifically wanted to get blacks off the Republican Party, voting Democrat. Blacks used to vote Republican. So he instituted welfare, and then decades later, of course, white people are going to start mimicking black culture. And here's my final thing I'm going to say. They should be shamed. I would go to that county as a white person, and I would go to that county in Kentucky, and I know Kentucky. I'd go there and say, what in the world is wrong with you? And I do it in my personal life. If I see a white person taking out a Lone Star card here in Texas, I will yell and scream at them. Don't shame yourself. Have some faith in yourself. Work hard. Do not take welfare. That is stealing from other people.
Let me ask you one simple question, and then we'll move on, because I don't think we're going to agree, but that's fine. That's life. Let's say your hours got cut back. Instead of working 60 hours a week, now your corporation, because they're going to have, for whatever reason, they're going to cut you down to $35 hours a week, just enough to be full time. What would you have to do to take care of your family?
I'd go down to the local pawn shop, plop down $50 and get a rusty old lawnmower. I'd go to the Office Depot with $5 in my hand. I'd get some flyers printed up, and I'd walk my neighborhood, and I'd have more work than I could handle within 2 hours. Let me tell you something. There's a black guy in my neighborhood. He's maybe in his 40s, little guy. He is the most wonderful person I've ever met in my life. This guy, he's got his own lawnmower service. He busts his butt for 6 days a week, sweating in the 95-degree heat. He doesn't bother anybody. He supports himself. He never asks for anything. His name's Johnny. I love this guy. Why can't more black people be hardworking and entrepreneurial like this guy?
I'm not going to chase that red herring. I'm going to follow up with the next logical step in that. If Johnny's already doing it and Johnny is capitalizing and getting all the business, what business is going to be left for you? You're assuming that you can go out and just get up all this business, but everybody is out there doing it. If everyone is out there doing it and you're not by yourself, your company laid off and cut hours for 500 people, and can everybody go out there and cut grass? There are going to be some people. There are going to be some people. If everybody is doing it, I forgot your name at the top of it, but Johnny, you mentioned Johnny. If everybody is doing it, how are you going to be able to compete with everyone else that is out there? I tell you what, this is what you do. You put that theory into action. And actually, better than that, I want you to go and I want you to look at the number of people who are working poor, legitimately working poor, who are working 40 and 50 and 60 hours a week, but are only making $10 an hour. And so they have been taught by their corporations to go and get welfare. So you're mad. You're mad at the wrong people. You're mad at the wrong people because you see a Hispanic or a black person in front of you. And you say, oh, that's because they're lazy. You don't even know if they have a job. You don't even know if they're working. They could be working just as hard as you. They could be just working twice as hard as you, but not making as much as you make per hour. And so they have conditioned you so much so that now all you see is the 5 cents on the dollar that you give to food stamps, but you pay no attention. None of that visceral anger that you have, none of it is directed to like 30 cents on the dollar. Now I'm throwing out these numbers because I don't have the stats in front of you, but it is that dramatic of a difference. You're angry with the person who's taking 5 cents out of your dollar versus the people who are taking 30 cents out, and you think they're eating steaks and lobsters? They're riding in their yachts. They're living in their skyscrapers. They're eating the caviar. So you're mad because a working poor person is getting a lobster, right? Which whatever. I don't even like lobster like that. So I'm not defending their right to eat lobster. What I'm saying is your anger is misplaced. Your anger is so misplaced, and you are the exact product. You are the exact product of what I was talking about, of 30 years of propaganda. And you feel like all you have to do is go and get a lawnmower and go and cut grass. But you already said Johnny is capitalizing on it. So what are you going to do? What you're most likely going to do when the rubber meets the road and you cannot feed your family anymore, you will be in the working poor legitimately, and you will go out and get food stamps to feed your kids. And then I'm going to walk up in line behind you and say, why the hell won't you get a job, you lazy ass bastard?
So one of the things I like doing the most is really a media critique, taking and unpacking what the media does and uses for their own political purposes, because we don't live in an age where we have unbiased journalism hardly anymore. We have outlets like Fox News. And so this next clip is a really short segment that I did to address the fact that Fox News uses black people for hire for the purposes of attacking black people. And this is a standard operating procedure for someone like Fox News. So it's a really short clip. Give your comments and your feedback. I want to know what you think.
Here you have the president make this insane, crazy comment of using the N-word to really distract. This is all a distraction, grand distraction to take away from the people uniting. And then the president in chief, the rapper in chief, now is further dividing our country. I find it outrageous.
I'll give Fox News one thing. They don't have a shortage of crazy black people that they can bring on their network to say all of the racist things that they want to say, but they know they can't get away with saying. I mean, it's you're not fooling anyone, Fox. We know good and well that your audience wants to hear these racially tinged connotations. They want to hear it so badly that you guys go and pull up the craziest black people possible just so that you can give it to them. You bring up Stacey Dash, who's completely irrelevant, to get her to say that black people just want food stamps. You bring up this Doreen Borelli, who's, I mean, crazy as they come, and so that she can call the president the rapper in chief. You get the Jesse Lee Pedersen, who might just actually be crazier than Doreen Borelli, and you get the E.J. Jackson. You bring all these commentators on and pay them this money so that they can say the things that your audience craves. It is laughable if it wasn't so sad. You're not fooling anybody. What goes across your airwaves and what your crowd listens to and wants to hear, you are responsible for. So you are just as racist. It's kind of like if I wanted to say to my audience that the Fox News viewers are typically trailer park and they are typically addicted to meth, you would call me a racist if I said that. But if I brought a white person on my show and had them say the same exact thing, well, you know, you can't call me a racist because I didn't say it, even though my audience got the kicks and the giggles out of it, right? Fox, save your money. Be man enough, woman enough to say your own racist things. Come on, Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly. Stop bringing on these imbeciles to say the things that you're afraid of saying. You're not fooling anybody. It would be laughable if it wasn't. Well, actually, it is laughable. I'm out of here.
So in this next clip, I dealt with a positive spin on what Bernie Sanders could do to win. A lot of things, this happened last year right after the Netroots Nation. This is the video that came right after Netroots Nation, and also after Black Lives Matter Seattle shouted down Bernie Sanders. And I spoke of it from a positive point of view of what Bernie Sanders could do to win, because I knew that if I said the exact opposite, if I said these are the things that Bernie Sanders is doing that's going to cause him to lose, then no one would be able to hear it. And so I addressed that in this video, and I want you to listen in on some of the things that we were talking about a year ago that actually played out exactly like we thought, because, you know, we saw it coming like a freight train, and unfortunately we weren't prepared to stop it. But this is one of those things that I wish I wasn't right about. But listen in on what Bernie Sanders could do to win.
Somebody on Team Bernie Sanders himself, obviously, but somebody on Team Bernie understands what he is going to have to do to beat Hillary Clinton. He must. Listen, folks. It was painful for people to watch Bernie Sanders get interrupted on last Saturday. And a lot of people have been running, and I've been talking about this all week, and hopefully this is the last day I have to talk about it. But people have been running to Bernie's defense, and people have been running to his defense by attacking or trying to undermine or question the validity and the methodology of Black Lives Matter, to the detriment of Bernie Sanders. What Bernie Sanders has to do to win, he must begin to communicate his message in a language that is not only palatable, but is relevant to other demographics that he needs to capture. Bernie must get minorities, and Bernie must get women. And one thing that Hillary Clinton has locked down right now is minorities and women. So there cannot be any equivocation. There cannot be any fear. You cannot win this by lecturing them. You cannot do this by trying to tell Black people that their problems can all be fixed if we just look at economics, when in reality, we do have an economic problem. Clearly, I can show you all of the economic roots of systemic racism. That is one thing I harp on a regular basis. Racism is just the tool of economic exploitation. White supremacy itself was for nothing else but to pull money out of people, to extract wealth out of people. I can definitely show you the economic roots, and that if we undo some of the economic problems, if we undo some of the things that were done to us in 1981 and hence after, then it would make it better for everyone. However, there are additional problems, and there are additional problems that must be addressed. And I'm so glad that there are some pragmatic adults on Bernie Sanders' team who can say, you know what, Saturday we had a little bump in the road, but we can absolutely win the minority vote for two reasons. One, Bernie has a great track record. That's true for three reasons. One, he has a great track record. Two, his economic policies are actually absolutely in line with the very same criticism of Black people that we have the criticism that Black people have of Barack Obama. The criticism that most Black people have of Barack Obama is that he's not far enough to the left. Believe it or not. I mean, think about it. Well, maybe you don't go. So let me vouch for, let me tell you about it. When I go to barbershops to get my hair cut, which I absolutely need to do, right? I don't hear anybody criticizing Obama about austerity. Man, we just need a little bit more austerity. If we just cut taxes a little bit more, everything will be great for the Black community. No. The critique of Barack Obama and the modern Democratic Party is that from African Americans is to the left of Barack Obama, not the right. We are upset because politicians have been bought by lobbyists and corporations. So Bernie Sanders can win for that reason. But then finally, Bernie Sanders can win because he, at his core, is a populist. But if we get so caught up, and this is why I titled it what I titled it this morning, if we get so caught up on trying to defend Bernie instead of trying to make Bernie better for the general election and make him better to absolutely destroy Hillary Clinton, then we're going to do more damage to Bernie than we are good. What happened at Netroots Nation was pivotal. I cannot stress to you enough. What happened on Saturday was a gift to Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley. And that's why I think Hillary Clinton lost out by not being there. You're not challenged. Challenges, okay, here's my philosophical idealistic side. Challenges make you stronger. And listening to Bernie Sanders now, he probably understood before Saturday, right? But he didn't have the verbiage, he didn't have the language, he didn't have the talking points, and he was more timid with regard to just coming out and unashamedly saying that there is systemic racism in America. If you cannot say that sentence right now without fear of what people are going to say, you cannot get the minority vote. And if we're talking about how Bernie can win, the only way he could win is if he is a better advocate for African-American issues than Barack Obama, which is easy. And he's a better advocate for women issues than Hillary Clinton, which is that's the next phase. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the only way Bernie Sanders can give Hillary enough hell to actually win this primary. Now, I was listening to, I actually caught, what's your boy name? Tom Hartman. I saw a couple of his videos on YouTube, and I listen to him when I can on Sirius. And you know what? That's when I realized, the people that I've been dealing with on the internet, which are, I feel, I am of the opinion that people on the internet have more power than campaigns believe. Because they are the face, they are the average everyday face that we, the average American, that's who we deal with, that's who we interact with. And so when all you get from people online is, oh, well, Black Lives Matter should have done this and they shouldn't have done, even Cenk Uygur took the video from Saturday and got livid about it and tried to lecture Black Lives Matter. But then I stumbled onto Tom Hartman, and that's when I realized somebody gets it. Tom Hartman absolutely gets it. Whether or not, and again, I operate on two frequencies at the same time: pragmatist and an idealist. Whether or not Tom Hartman actually identifies with Black Lives Matter, whether or not he loves their movement, whether or not he was offended by what they did on Saturday, he is pragmatic and politically astute enough to realize that we need Black Lives Matter vote, the Black Lives Matter vote. And so he didn't get so distracted by what happened. What he did was begin to beat the drums of what is going on across the nation that is clearly an atrocity. It is clearly wrong. It is disgusting what happened to Sandra Bland. It should not have ever happened. She should not have been in jail. And so what I'm trying to convey to you guys with regard to Bernie Sanders and anybody else who is idealistic, when you see something like this happening, you should be able to see that it is damning enough for you never to have to lecture Black Lives Matter about their methodology. You just have to say what happened should never have happened. And if you elect Bernie Sanders, we'll make sure that that never happens again. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how we can help Bernie Sanders win. If we stop with the lectures and start saying, okay, every time we see systemic racism, every time we see an injustice, every time we may not like how Black Lives Matter does their thing, right? We may not like how they mobilize. We may not like how they protest, but damn it, I hate what I see going on in Texas more. I hate what I saw in Philly yesterday. Police officers handcuffed a man. 2 police officers had a man in handcuffs, punched him in the face twice, and then slammed him onto the car in front of a camera. There's enough there. The evidence is overwhelming. There should be enough for you to say, you know what? I may not like Black Lives Matter, but they have a point. And I believe that Bernie Sanders is the person who can address it the best. Let's stop lecturing them, folks. Let's stop lecturing them and listen to them. And I guarantee you, Bernie Sanders said it, and I'm going to play the clip coming up after this break. I guarantee you, if we start listening and start addressing, Bernie Sanders can whip Hillary Clinton's tail in the minority vote. And then we have to ask, how does he do it in the female vote? And it's nothing against Hillary. I just want to see a really good race. We'll be back after this break.
Listen, folks, thanks so much for being here with me as I went over some of my favorite clips. Maybe you have some that you think are better than the ones that I played, but I wanted to share some of these key clips because a lot of you who are with us now weren't with us at the beginning, and it's so new. The whole show is so new that the things that we were talking about at the very beginning, we see playing out right now in front of us. So that's why I wanted to share it. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for being a part of the Benjamin Dixon Show. Please become a subscriber. Please become a patron. Donate whatever you can to help us keep pushing this progressive movement forward. And I will see you guys. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.